I was born in this province and I'm of a certain age, and so I have lived through 4 recessions at this point. And it shocks me that anybody's surprised that oil goes up and down, because it does, and it always has, and it always will. We do live in an oil-based economy, so people who live in this province and don't prepare for that eventuality, I don't understand that really, although I understand it is frustrating. And just as a note, this particular recession, the idea of preparing for it is a kind of an interesting concept. There's not a lot of way to prepare for something that even pundits were not prepared for. The oil glut and the situation that's resulted from it came on pretty quickly. So no, I'm not frustrated living in an oil-based province. I think people should remember that this is going to happen, and they should sort of plan long-term financially, because this isn't the last one.
I think Julie touched on a few things that are on many people's minds. One of them being that people have overextended themselves in Alberta and then went ahead and lost their job. Is that what you're seeing in your experience, Jeanette?
I think that has happened. We've seen it happen before, and we're going to see it happen again.
Kind of human nature?
I think it is in human nature, but again, it is different right now. Interest rates are much different. They're not 12 to 17% that they were in 1982.
Sub 3, yeah.
So you know, people aren't having to necessarily walk from their homes. I'm sure there is some of that happening, but I think that in many aspects we're a bit stronger now than we were years ago.
Richard, back to the process of being laid off. By law, what is required by way of severance from employers to employees? I understand it's
well, labor standard sets out two weeks pay in lieu of notice. Beyond that, so that's the legal obligation. But I will preface my remarks by saying, don't take legal advice from a career coach, and don't take career advice from a lawyer.
Okay.
There is case law for sure that sets out what kind of severance an individual should receive, predicated on their age, their personal circumstance, years of service, and other criteria that the court would deem relevant. Generally speaking, though, I will say this, that in my experience, what I've witnessed is that severances are what I would seem to be as equitable in the main. There certainly would be exceptions. For most of the people that are being impacted. That's not a universal truth for sure. I'm sure some of your viewers would say,
no,
well,
we won't hold you to it. No, that's right.
But that has been my experience. And I, in fact, participated in or co-facilitated a session with a labor lawyer last year at the start of the year. And his advice was to those in attendance, so these are corporations, with respect to severance, be equitable, be fair, and if you're going to err on the side of generosity. You simply don't want the headache that trying to save money on cheaping out on severances.
Well, and it doesn't look good to the employees that you're retaining. I mean, I can't imagine you have a lot of loyalty out of those people.
But I also have to say that when solvency is a consideration, you know, some companies may be at that stage, and they simply, if they're doing anything, you know, good on them, because they're making some pretty tough choices, and you know, other people may not be getting paid because they've made that choice. So there's no one size fits all in this respect. If you're in doubt with respect to the severance you've been provided, that's a legal question, and consulting an employment lawyer, frankly, is something your former employer would probably have recommended in your severance letter anyway.
That's good.
And it makes sense.
It's good advice. We talk about local business and how not everybody is hurting incredibly. You mentioned, you know, bars, that sale of alcohol makes sense. It's kind of went up. What are other industries that we're seeing doing fairly well? I mean, my mind flows towards tourism. Is there other local businesses that are faring pretty well right now?
You know, I think what's interesting about Calgary right now is I think that lack of awareness that really Calgary has a pretty strong knowledge-based economy. And so it's a lot of those knowledge-based jobs that have been doing really well right now. So, you know, you can take a look at the IT, you know, there's still demand for the IT sector. You take a look at educational services, one of the major employers in Calgary. You take a look at healthcare. Healthcare is still very high on the trend for jobs. You take a look at some of the business services as well. So, you know, thank goodness we have that diversity of sector growth right now. So that's going to help, that knowledge management base is going to help carry us through.
And, you know, it's interesting to me because, you know, I understand a lot of people are saying, well, where can I go outside of oil and gas? And I've even had conversations on here in that regard. but I'll give you, I host 3 networking events in my office weekly for the clients that I'm working with. So Monday, having a group, 28 people in the room, I asked at the start of the session, how was last week? One person said good.
Ouch.
Well, so I said, let's dig into this a little bit more. So within about 90 seconds, what I found out was that 10 people had had an interview the previous week. 10 people got an interview? Has anybody been reading the headlines?
Yeah.
And 9 of them had come through their network, so that's a really important lesson for your viewers. One of them had found a job posting, applied to it, and got an interview. One of them had an offer, and another had an offer pending. So that, in the midst of all, dollars where it is, oil's where it is, and it's doom and gloom, the sky's falling, blah, blah, blah. And what's really interesting is that a number of these positions were in fact in oil and gas. I had lunch recently with a talent acquisition specialist with a major oil firm. More than 40 positions currently being sought to fill. They're not all on their website. And this isn't uncommon. In addition to that, talking to a number of our clients recently, talking about the load that the survivors are bearing. So survivors being people who are still there, still have a job.
Yep.
And every time a group of people leave, the individual portfolios of those still there grows. The weight that they bear, the tasks that they're accountable for, grows.
Of course.
And to the point where it can get crushing. So I'm seeing some individuals getting contracts, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, to help situationally go in, lessen the load, put out that fire, deal with that project, deal with that data, and help them move forward a little bit. And I suspect we're going to see more of that as we go through the year. And
that's the reason.
It's a win-win. To Jeanette's point, huge horsepower available right now in terms of the talent that's on the street, more than willing to take on those kinds of tasks. And I see it really as a win-win. It's cash flow for those that are looking for work, keeps them in the game longer,
for sure. Makes
and
sense.
the companies benefit without taking on a severance liability and the cost of a full-time equivalent, because they simply can't bear the brunt of that right now.
Makes sense. Folks, we're going to jump to our final rant pack break. Stay with us.
I think Alberta's recent economic woes are a very diversified and long issue, but I also consider Alberta to be a bit of a banana republic. I also think that Alberta is very, very new money, and a lot of these people haven't really thought about, what happens if the price goes down to where it sits currently under $30 a barrel. It's just like, oh, this is going to last forever. Just buy the new truck, buy the new snowmobile, get the house at some ridiculous mortgage rate that you can barely afford, and if you lose one day of work, you're going to be in trouble. That's actually always been Alberta's problem. There's such a thing as old money and new money. Alberta's very new money, has no idea how to save it. And eastern provinces, when you have money and get money, you have a tendency to save it. I think that it is the PC's fault, as much as I don't want to admit that, for non-diversification of the economy in the past 44 years. However, the NDP has a chance to diversify the economy, and whether they're brave enough with the majority of the government to do so is, I guess, time will tell.
Just because I can. Curious both your opinions. Adam seems to think Alberta is new money as opposed to some other provinces out east that have old money. Is that a fair statement?
I was talking about this at lunch today. Montreal, for example, is, I think, 350 years old-ish. And Calgary is, well, what time is it? How old is it? So no disrespect to Calgary, but much younger. So, what would old money look like here? Practically speaking, I think we work hard, we play hard, we live large. Are we leveraged? Yeah, probably, but I think for the most part, I don't know that people were living beyond their capability, but when circumstances like this that are, sort of generally expected but unforeseen, the way it slid as quickly as it did this time, maybe you can find yourself over your head fairly readily. You look at one of the highest commodities at the moment are returned lease vehicles, Beamers, Mercs.
Yeah, the repo business guys are
and high-end homes is if you want deals, that's where the deals are. So if you got a couple extra $1 million burning a hole in your pocket, you may maybe have.
I'll check my other genes. It might not work out that way.
Calgary's also had the highest wages and salaries in the country
for an
extended period of time. So we also have the youngest workforce almost youngest workforce at 36.2 years of age on average. So that adds to the young money. right? And
Very good point, yeah.
you know, we've had a really heavy long run where people have worked very hard for a long time, and you're right, they have played hard. But I think now, we always have to have a market correction a little bit, and you know, let's hope this doesn't last too long. But we have been through this before, and if there's one word that identifies Calgary through the ages, is resiliency. And I think that, you know, people are going to be very surprised. We have not had a long year of long economic downturn for quite a long time. Last year we did see negative GDP growth, and we expect that that's going to happen this year. But I think that there's some pretty solid plans to try to get that purposeful diversification happening immediately. But I think we're going to come out of it a little bit differently.
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of companies are going to run a little bit leaner,
Absolutely.
like you touched on earlier.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the ownership of these companies might not be local anymore. You can see a bit of that. As far as, I guess, underemployed workers, when it's all said and done, I don't think we're going to see oil again at $100 plus a barrel. I think those days, it's fair to say, are done. I mean, hey, don't hold me to it, but chances are that will be the case.
Right.
If companies are running leaner, we're going to have a whole lot of highly skilled workers that are at risk for being, I suppose, underemployed. Is that a risk?
I wonder if, well, it could be, but I would argue that they may be other-employed.
Okay.
And so by that I mean, I might be in my second year of engineering at University of Calgary. Yeah. And my initial plan was I'm going to be a petroleum engineer. But now I'm looking at this market. I'm going to come out of school in, 2018. Is the market going to have recovered by then? Should I be looking at a course correction now to be exploring other options in other sectors where there may be longer term growth? So there's huge growth expected in alternate energy, green power, and green tech. We're seeing lots of growth in construction in the short term. So if I'm an EIT, an engineer in training, I may be looking at, well, you said at the outset, something in the order of $1 billion in infrastructure spending that's planned. We know some of the projects that are planned already, the Green Line, for example. So I might be asking myself, how might I repurpose my skills to bring them to that sector? Because the other sectors, as Jeanette has said, have actually been quite brisk, and they don't have a talent pool to draw from. So there is a talent pool that's existing and growing in the short term that, frankly, could be a win-win. You look at these infrastructure projects; they're typically not long cycled. These aren't, you know, like 20-year projects or 10-year projects. They would have a time horizon.
There's going to be opportunity. We will see opportunity. I'm going to actually make that our final word. Thanks very much to the both of you for being here. I know time just scoots right by. It's incredible, isn't it? Folks, that's all the time we have for this evening. As always, you can get at us. We're on Facebook, Twitter as well. Don't be a stranger. Until next time, take care.